Hey, what's going on, everybody? We got Shotgun Spratling here, covers college baseball for D1Baseball. Shotgun, I had to bring you on. It worked out great to get some perspective on Miami's new transfers, but also you were one of only 10 guys there that predicted Miami in the way too early, 8 for Omaha next season. You like Miami, to make it to the College World Series last year after going 35 and 27 last year, this past season, make it to the Super Regional. What do you like about this Miami team looking ahead to next year?
I mean, it starts with JD Arteaga. I mean, just being around them, I was at the Louisville Super Regional and getting to chat with him, chat with the staff, just seeing their approach, the way they kind of go about things. I just feel like as they master the transfer portal a little bit more, they went with a different route last year than they traditionally have. They left Southern Florida to go get some pieces, going to Hawaii, going to different places to find talent. I feel like the talent they brought in really fit for the program. But now they've got to go get more talented pieces. Watching them in that Louisville Super Regional, I thought Louisville was more talented. However, I love the way Miami played. Obviously, Daniel Cuvée in the middle is a superstar, but I just love the pieces that they went out and got, and were able to piece together to create that roster. So I just thought with the pieces coming back that they have, building around Cuvée, that you add that and the experience that they got in that Super Regional, and then I think they'll go out and they'll continue the way they went about getting things in the transfer portal this past season. But I think they'll be able to land a couple more pieces that will be really good for them. And I think they've done that already, gotten a couple pieces that will be very productive for them going forward. So kind of combining all those pieces, after seeing them in Louisville, I was pretty high on them going forward, and I think that they can make some noise next year.
Shotgun, can you put maybe into words exactly what you're speaking about in terms of what you liked with Arteaga, the staff, the vibes? I kind of talked about it all season long and tried my best to explain it. Just that, and the players, as the season was going on, I mean, they just talked about the vibes, and that's the best way to explain it. There's just this good vibes around that program, and JD was so confident and really all throughout the year, even if the results weren't there, he just thought this team was special. And look, it's easy to say at the end of the year when you have a great run, but he was high on this team with its makeup. What was something that you noticed, or was there some things in particular that kind of stood out to you in that Louisville Super Regional there?
I mean, I'll start with the very end, in the press conference after they lose. And Will Smith is up there, a guy that spent 5 years elsewhere and then came for one season just as a mercenary, and he's balling basically. That's how much this team had meant to him to be able to come in and be a part of it. And he's only been there one year. And now maybe he's just a super emotional guy, and I don't know his background very much. But that really stood out to me that and JD's like putting his arm around him and everything. It was kind of a touching moment to see how much this team did mean to those players. And it kind of just, because I always go down, especially in the postseason, I chat with the coaches before the games, kind of during BP, just kind of get a feel because, hey, I haven't been around the program all season. But just talking with not just JD, but also some of the assistants, some of the staff members, the analytics staff, everyone was really bought in. Everyone had that, it was a we before me mentality for them. And then when you have a superstar like Daniel Cuvée and talking to other people about him, and they say he's the hardest worker, he's the guy that everyone else looks to, then that builds that as well because Cuvé's pretty quiet, and is not a rah rah type of guy, but he can get emotional and get charged up during a game, and everyone feeds off of him as well. I just think that you have all the right mentalities to go about it, and that was kind of how they built last year. They didn't just go and say, hey, who's got the best fastball, who's got the best pitch that we can add to the club. It's who's going to fit in best with this program, and they went about it that way. And the different ways that they kind of go about with their modeling of who's going to be good in the transfer portal and stuff. I really enjoyed talking with some of the behind the scenes guys about that type of stuff. I just came away really impressed with the program overall. And then, like I said, I think when you add a little bit more talent this offseason, I think they have a chance to do that. And, it's obviously the hotbed of talent that is Southern Florida. I think they will be able to add some pieces through, the freshman class that's coming in. And I think that they'll be able to be a contender in the ACC next year.
Certainly, you touched on Daniel Cuvée, and not to overlook him because that's where all this comes from. Essentially, that they've got a chance to do great things because he's such a great performer, a high producer, as you mentioned, just a superstar, one of the best in college baseball. Expecting that again next season. So let's talk about these pieces that they've added. Shotgun, the pieces they've added so far. Three bats in particular stand out to me. All guys were double-digit home runs this past season, high upside guys to me. It looked like they could fit in the ACC, do well, and kind of fit in this lineup. Let's start with Alex Sosa, the catcher out of NC State. Just a little bit of news in case people haven't been following, but after Sosa was added, that his announcement that he's going to Miami. There are two other catchers on the roster, were late additions to the transfer portal. Evan Tavares, Nolan Johnson were freshmen last season, but they are in the transfer portal with the addition of Sosa. But we'll see. Sometimes guys do go in the portable. Miami baseball has seen this recently. Renzo Gonzalez, Gabby Gutierrez, those are two guys that were in the portal at one point, came back to the program. So we'll see. But Alex Sosa, what do you like about him? Certainly a big season, sophomore season for NC State, hitting 291, the 10 homers, the 40 RBIs, left-handed bat. What do you like about him and that addition at the catcher spot?
I mean, you say big season. I call that unspectacular for him. I think there's another level for him. He's a big time prospect coming out of Vieira High School in Melbourne. Coming out of high school, he struggled as a freshman at NC State. Hit 230, 6 bombs, 24. He kind of came on late in the season. Now I saw NC State in the Super Regional last year, so I got a chance to see him up close. The bat speed is real. That's the biggest thing there when you look at him. And then this year, 291, 10, 40, solid season, I would say, but I wouldn't even call it spectacular for him. I think there's another level that can be unlocked with him. And coming back home, basically coming back to Florida, I think will be an opportunity for him to come in. The one thing he has to do is he's got to cut down on the strikeout rate. He's got 84 career strikeouts. If they can get him to put the ball in play a little bit more, like I said, the bat speed is legit. The ball pops off, it comes off his bat, trampoline effect. So I think he's a middle of the lineup bat immediately that you'll throw in there and to provide some protection from the left side. So that's something that Miami didn't have a ton of pop from the left side this season, but they should have that on the behind Cuvée, in front of Cuvée, however they want to do it, and it gives you options. Tanner Smith was a very solid receiver. Now Sosa is a guy I haven't watched catch a bunch. I don't believe he caught, if I remember correctly, in that Super Regional. I think it was DHing, but he's a guy that has got a big time reputation behind the plate. So we'll see if he can come in and be a strike stealer for you and do what you want with your pitching staff to help them out along the way.
And certainly just the way Arteaga likes to go with the lineup, I wouldn't be surprised if he hits right behind Cuvée, that right-left matchup, and just looking at the rest of their guys on the team, I could see Sosa kind of fitting in right there, and then they kind of just stagger it right-left, and we'll see. But, plenty to go until they get some lineup stuff. But another guy, a guy, Brylan West out of FIU, off-conference player, a guy that you guys at D1Baseball ranked pretty highly, 13th in WAR in the transfer portal. What do you like about Brylan? It's kind of an interesting guy with a high average, the homers, again, maybe some more power there. They bat him at the top of the lineup quite a bit, so the RBI totals aren't as high. But what do you know about Brylan? And, when I'm looking at these guys, too, you touched on Tanner Smith, this looks to be an upgrade at the catcher spot. Certainly at first base, quite a bit of an upgrade with what they had production-wise at first base. So Miami adding some key guys and getting some upgrades, I think, in the offensive production standpoint. But what do you like about Brylan there?
Yeah, I mean the fact that you can add some pop at first base, that's not something that was necessarily an aspect of Miami. You want to, your first baseman, your corner infielders, you want some big boppers to be there. You got that at third base for sure. But at first base, it was more average over power. So looking forward to potentially adding that. He's a guy that produced against Miami this season, and when that happens, you look across the way, and when you get upset by somebody during a midweek and someone that's right across town, you start paying a little bit more attention to him. And if I remember correctly, he had a big game, I think, in the second matchup that they had. But that's something that stands out for sure. And I'm sure they started keeping tabs, and when they saw him go in the portal, said, "Hey, this is a guy that's already in the city. Let's just keep him here, and let's bring him in." And he fits a need for them as someone who has some pop. But I like the fact that 12 homers, 20, didn't have the ton of RBIs like you mentioned because he was hitting in the leadoff spot, but 39 free bases to 33 strikeouts. Now that's 28 walks, 11 hit by pitches, but he's getting on base more than striking out. and he's also got the power. That stands out to me, especially for a first baseman. Is it someone who's just a free swinger and can hit the ball out of the park, or is it somebody who can be patient, 338 hitter? That's why you can put him at the top of the lineup. So, I think he's a versatile piece that you can move around potentially in the lineup in different spots, and so that gives you a lot of flexibility if you're JD Arteaga.
Yeah, just touching on West stats against Miami. Played 7 games against the Hurricanes in his time there. Hit 370 with a double and 3 RBIs. 10 for 27. Had that walk-off hit against the Hurricanes. So certainly they know, or they are certainly hoping big things from him. A guy that they didn't see last year at FIU, Easton Marks, the right-handed pitcher. Not a midweek starter, a guy that comes over. And I remember talking to him last summer just about his transfer portal possibilities in Miami, and he was interested. It just didn't work out. He didn't have the numbers, coming from Nevada there, but had a kind of a breakout season, or definitely much improved from last season, from the year before. It gets to FIU. He's excited about coming over to Miami, and certainly figures to be a starter for Miami. Anytime you can get a rotation guy, that's a big thing. What do you kind of like about Easton, that addition, the right-handed pitcher there?
Yeah, I mean, huge pickup here, huge jump for him last year. He was at Nevada before that, 2 years, not a ton of success, was in the starting rotation. Now, it's a lot different when you're pitching in Reno versus pitching in Miami, when it's hot and humid in Miami versus it gets cold, it's difficult to pitch in. It's also the ball flies in Reno. So big time difference there. But he came in and became their ace. That was the part that's impressive is, a guy that's a true 5 pitch mix. He throws 5 different pitches, 5 different shapes. The slider and cutter are a little bit similar, but 91, 94, he'll touch 95. I know I've seen things that said he was up to 97. I looked through the synergy data. He touched 95 a few times this year, but did not throw any 97s in games. But 91 and 94 will definitely play if you can mix like he can do with 5 different pitches. First team All Conference USA, 72 strikeouts in 67 innings. The one concern, a little bit high on the walk rate. 35 walks in that 67 innings. So you want to cut that down. Just refine the stuff. If he can take another step forward, and that's what you're building on here is going to be challenging making that jump from Conference USA to ACC, but can you continue to develop? And he's done that every year. You look at his ERA, it's gone down from 13 to 7.9 to 3.4. So, on that trajectory, hey, he should be in the, 1.5 next year or something. But, you're not expecting that, but he's been a guy that's progressed each year. And you see that as someone who's pitching the big moments for FIU, the guys they trusted on Friday. So, where will he fit into the rotation? That'll be an interesting, spot, but definitely a weekend rotation guy that should be able to come in and at least compete for one of those spots and give them more depth on the pitching mound.
You touched on a few things that certainly stand out to me. It's fascinating how coaches all across the country kind of figure out data in terms of where they were, if they're taking a step up in conference, but also kind of with that, the line of improvement, going from typically these guys are sophomores, a lot of sophomores in the transfer portal. Maybe you do get the seniors, the juniors that are really good are going to be drafted, so it's just kind of this interesting formula they have to calculate. And as you mentioned, Marks has clearly gotten better year over year. So you're hoping he can take that next step, even though he's going up in a step in conference play there. Another bat, kind of going back to it with Vance Sheahan out at USC Upstate. Had a chance to talk to his Cape Cod League manager, just to get his take on Vance, kind of what he sees early going. Wasn't performing real well, but there's things that he likes about him. Vance put up some good numbers last year at Upstate. Kind of a speed guy, the 25 stolen bases. You like that? Some power, some pop, some average. Had a really good freshman year as well. What do you see from Vance? And again, one of these guys trying to take that next step in conference here.
Yeah, the fact that you not only get the average, a little bit of pop, just a little bit of everything. He kind of gives you a little bit of everything. It reminds me of what they got this year out of JD Ogden. Now, where does Ogden play next year if he comes, or Jake Ogden, excuse me, if he comes back? He could be drafted, he could not. So, Ogden hadn't played shortstop until this year. So does Sheahan come in and play shortstop? He moved to Ogden to second base. There's different pieces if you get Ogden back, if you get him through the draft. But very similar to me in regards to the type of players they are. They can do a little bit of everything, just solid all-around guys. And that's what you want out of your middle infield. You play good defense, and then can you give us a little bit of everything with the bat? You'll be super excited about it. And so, to me, if you do get Ogden back, you add Sheehan, you add the other pieces we've talked about, the top of the lineup is just getting deeper and deeper, and suddenly the lineup as a whole is longer because it felt like it was very much a top heavy lineup this season. And then okay, we hope we get some production down the way, but I think that they're building the lineup around Cuvée and Ogden potentially coming back. We'll see if that happens, but adding Sheehan, I think is a big piece that will potentially be their starting shortstop, and then potentially, be a guy that could hit leadoff for you if you wanted him to as well.
Yeah, you touched on Jake Ogden. I definitely want to bring this up because there's three guys I think Miami's going to look for that maybe they return depending on the draft. And three key guys with Ogden there. Max Galvin's a guy, redshirt junior. He's playing it back in the Northwoods League. And then Derek Williams, he's a guy that has another year of eligibility. All three guys, one of the kind of, to me, fit in this, highly productive, very productive with what they got last year. I know Derek dealt with that injury in the middle of the season, but I think if they're not drafted, they possibly could. They're not brainers by any means. I think if they could get two out of the three to come back, I think that'd be great. One for sure, because all three of those guys to me are starters once again, and I think that's what you're looking for at the lineup. Shotgun, you can kind of speak to this, but for teams that do really well in college baseball, you really want your essential guys that are going to be day in and day out starters in the lineup. You want your routine guy. You want to be able to put them out there and kind of have baselines. And certainly you have guys like Cuvée that really elevate past the averages. But you want to be able just to kind of throw out a lineup day in and day out. And as you mentioned, Miami last year kind of had this bottom of the order of who do we put in there? How do we piece it together? I think if you add in some of those pieces that could return, the returners that they have here, certainly they look to have a better lineup than last year, finishing 12th in the ACC in conference runs per game there out of the 16 teams. So they also add Michael Taylor. Don't want to forget about him. Bullpen guy, it looks like, out of UNLV, right-handed pitcher. I think they're going to add more. I know that the transfer portal has closed, the window is closed, but draft coming up on the 13th, 14th. Coming up here, and as I touched on some guys, but they can still be added. They just can't go into the portal the way it works. Are there some spots, Shotgun, that you're thinking, hey, maybe Miami should address this, or some things that you're looking at? I do like some of the guys they have coming in. If they're not drafted in their signing class, but are there spots or maybe some position areas that you're like, okay, they need to kind of tighten up here a little bit, maybe add a few more pieces?
Yeah, you always want more depth on the mound. That's something, especially you see Jackson Cleveland go into the transfer portal. That's a piece that they could have used next year. But every team is kind of going through this. They're kind of like, all right, we can grab the guys we know are going to be potential impact players for us. And Michael Taylor, we just touched on him, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be a specialist. He's low 90s. His fastball gets hit, though, but he's more of a cutter slider guy. He only gave up one hit on 52 cutters thrown this past season. He had 0.91 average against that pitch. So that's something I think they'll work on and continue. That's someone they probably identified. Like, let's go through the data. Jacko down there in Miami that does a great job with all the analytics, probably going through all the data and like, this guy's got a special pitch. Let's see if we can build around it type of thing. But you got to add more pieces. Brian Walters is a question mark, to return. If I'm remembering correctly on his eligibility, I believe he's draft eligible. So, Griffin Hughes, does he come back? There's a couple pieces that, are kind of draft. I think the lineup, I don't think you'll have much concern besides Ogden. I think Galvin will be back. I think Derek Williams will be back. I don't see either one of those guys being drafted. So you've got the top of your lineup now, probably six deep. Compared to what you had last year, where you had four guys that batted 400, and then it was a big drop off the rest of the way. Hey, you'll get a couple big hits from Tanner Smith or Dorian Gonzalez or something down the way, but it was outside of Cuvée, Ogden, Williams, and Galvin. No one hit 260. So, and you have guys stepping up in big moments like Kulikowski. I thought his bats were great in the Super Regional. Yeah, a little bit disappointed to see him go into the portal because I thought he could be a guy that could maybe take the next step next year. But I think that's a product of the house settlement. Anyone who's not produced for you is very much was a candidate to go into the portal this year because teams are having to cut back their rosters down to 34 by December 1st. So that is a big thing. So a lot of fans out there may be looking at it and seeing, their teams, Miami fans or anywhere else going, man, how are so many of these guys going in the portal? This doesn't make any sense. Well, teams had to clear space basically. So a lot of it was, hey, would love to have you back, but don't think you're going to get as much playing time as you want to. Those type of conversations, I think, happen a lot. So on the other side, though, the big question will be on the mound. The lineup seems pretty, not necessarily settled, but you have a pretty good vague idea of it. On the mound, there's still some big question marks. Who's going to return? Who's going to be in what positions. If they get Hugus back, I think that's huge for them. And then you add those two freshmen that started late in the season. I think you just continue to build with Siskar, build with those guys that were there, and you just got to continue to add pieces on the mound. So I think that's the area where you may see them try to continue to address, is on the mound, and try to get some more pieces that can either be long reliever guys, or can be they can be a specialist out of the bullpen to help in the back end as well.
Shotgun, this was great. Great information from you. It's good catching up again. We've done this before, so definitely appreciate you. Great, good insight. I'll leave it to it. Your time is valuable, but thanks for joining me here. Plenty of insight.
Thank you for having me. Always appreciate it.